Welcome back, everybody, to another Growth Support Conversation. My name is Neal, and today we're talking with Idit about really global support, what that means in terms of the differences between having a local journey and being able to grow it out, and how to set yourself up for success when it comes to that. Idit, do you want to introduce yourself and where you're coming from?
Yeah, hi Neal. Thank you for having me here. My name is Idit. I have built my career around support since I can remember. I love support, passionate about it. Started as an individual contributor, as we all did, I assume, and then moved up to leadership, and I've been a manager of support teams for over a decade. I've always been to B2B support, so this conversation today will be mainly around B2B. That's what I know. That's my bread and butter. Also worked only at SaaS companies and mainly focused on B2D, so business to developer products that are focused and aimed for developers. And I think today we're going to talk about how to run global support.
Nice. When it comes to global support, I mean, for our organization that I'm currently with, we're running local times and having a regular office hours for our local time and stuff. And something that I've always toyed with or gotten asked the question of is, hey, when are we going to do like chase the sun, or when are we going to do global support or offer more hours and stuff? And it's always been a question of like, well, should we not? Is there an actual demand for it? And this kind of thing. I'm curious from your side, like when would you start to consider some of these things when it comes to running a global model and what that looks like?
Yeah. Great question. And like you said, it's a matter of demand. So I guess the question is, where are your customer located? Like at what hours of the day do they need support? Do you have a strategic customer, maybe a new customer that you're onboarding that's on a different region that you're trying to expand to North America, you're trying to expand to APAC? If you have that strategic customer located in some region, you probably need to have support available during that time as well. Now, it doesn't mean that the support needs to be local to that region. It could be that they still continue to operate from your current local hub in a shifted schedule, in shifts. But yeah, that's I think it's just a matter of demand. So understanding where your customers are, and if you have that strategic customer or customers that are asking for contractual SLAs, meaning you are committed in your contract with them to achieve some SLA, then I mean, you would have to obligate that commitment.
Yeah, so if there is that actual contract and that SLA in place, you actually have to be able to support that and make sure that it runs smoothly and goes well. Exactly. You mentioned something interesting, like it doesn't necessarily, having a global support model doesn't necessarily mean that you need people all over the globe. It could also be a local team, and being able to decide shifts or extended coverage. Are there some of those different kinds of models that you've seen throughout the industry? And what do you think is a little bit deciding factors in that sense?
Yeah. So there's always a headquarter, right? Or you know what? I shouldn't say always, because in today's world, there are companies that are completely remote. So maybe it's distributed teams anyway. But usually there is some hub. Maybe the R&D sits in some place, or whatever the company does. Again, I'm coming from, SaaS, B2B companies. So if you run your support out of that hub, it's easier to have all the knowledge transferred, because support should be product experts, right? So if they sit next to engineering teams, product teams, marketing as well, they have all the tools to really be equipped with all that knowledge. Having said that, it limits you to just one time zone, right? So then you would have to look for individuals, for employees that are willing to work a shifted schedule. Now, a shifted schedule could be like starting to work from noon till 8 or 9 p.m., which could work for some people, but no one wants to work until like 4 a.m. in the morning, right? Or do the night shift from like 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. No one wants to do that, really. So
it takes a special motivation.
yes, it takes a special motivation, which can be questionable. By the way, I mean, why? Why is someone willing to do that? What do you do with the rest of your time? And I mean, I think it's hard to build trust with those employees of like, yes, I want to take the night shift. And it's also difficult to retain employees in shift model. Usually there's much more turnover with those type of employees. They don't feel like a full-time employee. They don't feel as committed to the company. Usually it's like one person is on a shift at any given moment, so they're working solo. You know, they don't feel that team around them. Yeah, so a lot of caveats in the shifts model. I personally don't think it's sustainable.
If you're really just trying to force a single location and cover everything, it's quite difficult. And also you lose all of the flexibility. I'm sure there's really great talent around the globe that actually has more flexibility in that sense.
Yes, yes. And also if you have just one person on every shift, what if that person can't come into work that day? You know, they take a day off, they're unexpectedly sick. Yeah, you don't have any wiggle room to make sure. You need to have someone like live and providing support.
And I mean, having run global teams, is there a model that you think is a bit more effective or more flexible than just having this kind of continuity issued shift model?
Yeah, so it's difficult, especially if you put in chat into the mix, right? So when you have chat support, you really have to have someone online. As you can understand from my previous statement, I think it's better to have a globally distributed team in different locations, and obviously have some redundancy in terms of not just have one person working on a specific shift, just to allow, some people take time off as well. And that is obviously difficult when you need to occupy all those shifts throughout, like 24/7. Now, today we have like a new player that is coming in with the AI bots, right? So
yeah,
if you put in AI into your support model as the first responders, you have someone on all the time, right? All times of the day. So if you do need that 24/7 support, I think that is a really good place for you to consider incorporating AI into your support model.
Yeah, I think if I think of my own situation and where we're at, it's 9 to 5, for example. And if we're saying, hey, we want to start building towards a higher coverage or extended hours type of a model, maybe the first step that we take is actually implementing something that is a bit more self-service, but interactive at the same time, where you have that first response and then see, okay, does it actually serve the need that we have in terms of the volume and the demand? Whereas if it's 24/7 tier 3 stuff, it might be a different story that you need to continue to start building out.
Yeah, so for tier 3 issues, we haven't touched upon that yet, but yeah, for tier 3, I was just talking about like the first response right now.
Yeah.
So in terms of like the tier 1. But if you talk about tier 3, for them, you build an on-call model. So you always have someone who is on call from the higher technical tiers. Even from the engineering teams, you need to have someone on call in case, you have a production incident. So those higher tiers, it doesn't mean that you need to have someone working that time, but you will need to have someone on call if, you have an urgent incident that comes in.
Yeah, going back to the uptime SLA example,
Yes.
making sure that you have somebody who can handle that regardless of what happens. I know that's going
Yes.
from having no on-call option or version takes definitely some change management as well while you're kind of going through the adjustments to start building that global aspect to your support organization as well. So it's always an interesting one to have as well.
Right. I also want to mention in terms of on-call that yes, when you build that model, you also have to think about the compensation model that's tied to it. Most companies don't really pay for on-call time. So you don't get paid for just being on call. And I think that's pretty reasonable because you can be on call for like a whole week. But if you do get to work during your on-call time, if you do put in the work, then I think you should be paid for that time. I think it really helps employees with employee satisfaction and actual willingness to, hop on, even if it's in the middle of the night, even if it's not in the middle of the night, maybe it's during their weekend and they're not supposed to be, it's not their normal work hours. Whatever time of day that is.
Yeah.
I think it's really important to have people be compensated for that time that they're putting in. And that will bring more loyalty from your employees. As we all know, it's hard. It's hard to be working in support and retain a sustainable team.
Yeah, especially if it is one of those things where, you really do need to balance, we have this customer demand, we have this customer need, but at the same time, our employees' well-being and actually having a good employee experience is really important, especially when it comes to retaining that talent and making sure that you can keep a sustainable model instead of just, okay, we did it for a while, but now we don't have anybody to be able to do it.
Yeah, like a couple of people quit on us and now we're like just juggling everything. Yeah.
Yeah, you're going to be in a worse spot if you don't handle it up front and be able to take care of it.
Yes.
It definitely makes a lot of sense.
Yes. Right.
When you talk about a distributed team, obviously
Mm-hmm.
that might cover a lot of different areas and time zones. There's often the model that's called Chase the Sun, where you have people who work across time zones so that, as the day progresses, new people will start their shifts and be able to kind of take those things over. When it comes to issue handling or incidents or things like this, I know that's oftentimes when you run a global team like that, it also becomes less of a assigned ticket basis, but more of a anyone touches and on everyone touches a ticket and it kind of goes through the time zones. How do you think that those handovers are supposed to work well? Or how do you set yourself up to have good handovers of conversations and incidents versus, okay, it's good luck?
Yeah. So let's unpack that because there were several topics there. So in terms of handovers, I think you should only hop on a call for a handover only for incidents, only for like really major, P1, P0 issues that is being handled within the support team. If you have like a daily handover call, that just is like the worst part of everyone's day. And they just start to hate it. So I think if you do need to hand over a ticket, do it in writing. As support, we're supposed to be very methodical and write clear steps. So like steps to reproduce, or this is what I have investigated. Here's a link to the log. So very detail oriented. That's a perfect support engineer. or support agent profile. So I say write everything for handovers. Even have a specific template of these are the details that must appear in a handover. Now, for the second part of your question, you said in some models, tickets are not really assigned, and you go on a shift and you touch whatever ticket is currently open, and there's no real owner to that ticket. I think that model can be problematic. And because it lacks ownership, right? One person doesn't see the issue from start to finish. They don't feel like I have to resolve this as quickly as possible because, worst case, I'll just hand it over to the next person. So I think that elongates time to resolution. And also it wastes a lot of the agent's time in trying to understand what happened so far, of like just recapping what previous agents did before them. So it's not efficient in that way in terms of the support agent work. And then if we think about it from the customer's point of view, they're located in a specific time zone. I mean, at the other end of that ticket, there's a user. Someone opened it. They're probably asleep right now as well, So it's good to have the agent time zone aligned with the user time zone and have consistency from there. But usually they're not, the end user are not expecting for the support to keep working on the issue like during their nighttime, unless it's obviously very urgent, and then it will require the follow the sun model with the handovers.
That's interesting because I would be curious if that also plays into the way that you need to build your operations around ticket routing and all of this. I mean, that's kind of in the weeds when we talk about this, but in a sense, like, do you only route like EMEA tickets to the EMEA team and the regional basis where you do align these shifts and time zones a bit more purposefully in that sense?
Ideally, yes, you will route EMEA tickets to the EMEA team. Now, if you think about first response metric, then hopefully a ticket opens up during EMEA hours. The first responder is someone from EMEA, right? If you don't have like a really long queue and a backlog, when a ticket is being opened, an agent is assigned and is looking into it. And if you then stay consistent with that assignment of the ticket, usually you get consistency of time zones between agent and user.
So the mass majority or the highest volume will be assigned properly, and those outlier ones that do come in throughout the night will go to the team that's active in that sense.
Yeah, I don't think a ticket should wait for an EMEA agent to pick it up. So I wouldn't force it in terms of routing. But that is if you're taking into account that every ticket that comes in is actually getting assigned and looked at, and you don't have this huge backlog. Yeah, because if someone is working in EMEA, like an end user, a customer of yours is working in the middle of their night, well, that's okay. So they probably don't want an EMEA person answering them. That person's a night owl, and that's their preferred hours.
Special motivation.
Yeah. They have to meet a deadline, Hopefully it's not their normal working hour. So.
I'm curious, like when we talk, because now we're talking about specific regional teams working, and we also had mentioned tiers before, where you have that first responder that could potentially be, an AI experience. You could also have these like first responders that are actual tier 1 folks. In that sense, how do you find the balance between building a team that is lean but also has this coverage where you need, okay, we need different tiers per region, but also the different regions covered in that sense.
Mhm.
Is there an experience that you had where you thought about that?
Yes. So if you have a lean team, meaning it's a relatively small company and a relatively small customer base, right? You start with coverage, global coverage, time zones coverage. Only when you get to a critical mass of tickets is when you need to start building those tiers. So that's really the second line of strategy that you need to think about. First, you need coverage, and only after that you build specification within your support team. And specification could be different tiers, like we've mentioned, but could also be different product lines. And yeah, build more in like a pod structure.
That makes sense. I mean, if you have product support, you have tiered support, you have so many different support operating models in that sense. Specifically, we want to put that into a global context here. I think that's a whole different conversation about operating models.
It's a staffing model. Yes, it's a staffing
indeed.
problem. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing your experience there when it came to thinking about those things. I'm curious if when you're setting up global support, what are the things that you wish you would have known earlier?
Yeah. I think don't wake people up in the middle of the night. That's a great takeaway. Like do whatever you can to adjust the on-call schedule to align with the person's awake hours, First of all, people don't function as well when they're being woken up in the middle of the night, obviously, and like very legitimately. And the second thing is again about employee experience. Like it's hard when you ask people to be woken up in the middle of the night or be in like, a working state of mind throughout the day, like throughout the 24-hour day. So really try to align the on-call hours.
I think when it comes to on-call as well, some of the things that I've heard is that, it's great to have on-call, but then the employee's like, but I'm not working, but I still need to be tied to the environment where I can work. And then it's always on your mind that it still affects your outside life because you are in that side of thing. I think it goes back to what you said, that compensation for the time, that employee experience, and aligning it to what would normally be working hours in that sense is really important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And then another thing I'll add about being on call, make sure you have playbooks ready. Because again, even if it's not in the middle of the night, but it's just something urgent has come up, right? That's why you are paging someone for as an on-call. Try to the best of your ability to have playbooks ready, even if it's minimal, but it's a starting point, So every time you do page someone for an on-call, try to do some light post-mortem of, hey, let's write a playbook in case something similar happens again.
Make sure that
as a good starting point.
If you wake somebody up in the middle of the night and their brain is groggy in the first place, it's already a foot down in that sense. You want to make sure you have the room and something to at least support them, to give them a bit of a handhold in that time period.
Yes, exactly. And even if it's not in the middle of the night, it's just a stressful situation.
Yeah, indeed. Like incidents in general, crazy.
Yes.
So when you talk about globally distributed teams and people working different shifts and being on call and really kind of being able to go through all of these different time zones and tiers and things. I'm curious when it comes to building the culture of your organization and team. You said some are full remote nowadays, some have local HQs, but having a distributed team means some people feel left out or don't feel like a full employee. You mentioned the night shift people feel lonely. How do you go about building the culture within your teams for a distributed team?
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's a question that a lot of teams are facing these days, not just support teams, but yes, support teams are more inherently distributed. So when you think of remote employees, and that's what I'll have in mind, because let's say maybe you're not even remote, but it's one person in each office, so you're working not alongside your team members. I think it's very important to have some sense of a team, some team camaraderie, feeling like you belong to, something greater than just you as an individual. What I have done is I made sure to have a weekly meeting with all of the team members. And it's hard. I mean, finding 30 minutes in the week that actually works for everyone, it's definitely not easy. And yeah, if you have people in EMEA and in APAC, that is almost impossible. But from my experience, people in APAC are used to hopping on calls in untraditional hours because, I mean, they're usually aware that most of the world is exactly opposite from their time. So finding 30 minutes sometime throughout the week for a team meeting to have everyone join in and be on the same page. So it's important to have updates, talk through what has been going on for the past week that everyone needs to be aware of. But it's also really important for just FaceTime. So today we're so used to meeting over Zoom or Google Meet or whatever virtual tool that is. You don't have to see someone in person, but it is important to have video on. And what I actually did at the last position I was in, we would start that meeting with just going about sharing what we did over the weekend. So it was like a Monday morning meeting and we all shared what we did over the weekend. Obviously, everyone can share only to the extent that they feel comfortable sharing. Some people would even share their screen and show pictures, but that really gives you a glimpse of someone's personal life and what they're doing in their free time, and helps build those relationships and personal bonds. So I think that's very important to make sure you have a sense of a team. I also consider doing remote happy hours, but that doesn't work. I mean, for someone, it's evening, or I don't know, let's say 6 p.m. Okay, it could be time for a drink, but for someone else, it's like 8 a.m. in the morning. There is no activity that would work for someone in opposite to time zones. So it doesn't work. Virtual happy hours for globally distributed teams.
Yeah, depending on what the activity is. If it's an online game or something like that, then it's also a fun activity. But something I think what you mentioned should just build that personal connection a little bit more, where you're actually having that moment of, oh, it's not just everyone doing async work, but it's actually being able to come together and learn more about each other as people and be able to have a more personal connection in that space so that you can build that team connection and culture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And if you can fly everyone for an on-site once a year, that is obviously ideal. When you meet someone in person, even if it's just as a one-time thing, you feel much more connected to them afterwards.
Yes. It's always different seeing somebody in person versus a visual call or something like that, or even
Mhm.
just in notes and in emails and whatnot.
Oh, yes, that's for sure. Yeah, just written communication is completely different.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Well, Idit, thank you so much for sharing your experience and giving some of these best practices and tips and what to look for when building a global model and being able to set yourself up for success. I really
Sure.
appreciate it. I have one last question for you.
Yeah.
Throughout your career, it doesn't necessarily need to be professional, also personal or anything. Throughout your professional experience, is there one thing that you've learned that you still stick to today?
Yeah, I think at some point in my career, my motto has become lead with empathy. And I think that really applies to when working with customers, in the support world. A customer would reach out to you when something goes wrong. They're unhappy, they're unsatisfied, they might be agitated. If you lead with empathy, that would go a long way because they're just trying to do their job, right? They're, again, in the B2B world, they're a professional, they're trying to execute a task, and they're blocked. And that's why they're now reaching out to you as another professional. Um, so if you understand where they are coming from, it would really help de-escalate the situation and get to a faster resolution, better customer satisfaction, customer retention, and all those things. But then it also applies to your team, colleagues, whoever you're working with. For me as a manager, I take that when I interact with my direct reports, to lead with empathy. So everyone's different, and maybe they had something going on in their personal life. I truly believe that everyone is trying to do their job well. They're trying to be good at what they do. So even if someone is underperforming, I don't think it's coming from the wrong reasons, from lack of motivation.
No, I
Yeah,
think it's super important to be able to do that, and thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it. It has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me for that conversation, and I really appreciate
for
it again.
having me. Yeah, this has been great. You've made me really think about some things that I've taken for granted, and now, like, spelling it out makes a lot of sense to me.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.